experts. We'll also examine the reasons crimes like these are underreported. All this straight ahead as True Hollywood Story investigates women who kill. And now, the host of THS Investigates, Samantha Harris.
The cases of Margaret Rudin, Clara Harris, and Kristen Rossum are officially reported as murder by intimate partners. Every year in this country, about 1,000 women fall into this group. But get this, experts believe the real number may be at least twice that high.
So how does a match made in heaven become hell on earth? Dr. Susan Crimmins, an associate professor at Cal State LA, has conducted extensive research on women who commit murder.
Homicide rates for women killing have increased slightly over the last 30 years or so, and right now they're responsible for committing about 11% of all homicides. More women commit homicide in the United States than any other country in the world.
Women who kill are also handled differently by the criminal justice system.
Women are typically treated more harshly in terms of sentencing.
When a woman kills somebody, I think most of society is shocked and say, this is not the nature of women. But for some women, it is.
When women kill in this country, there is a basic underlying assumption that they are nurturers. And as a result, when they do kill, they're treated very differently, from arrest through processing in the courts to sentencing to the way they are treated in correctional facilities.
Research shows that female abuse victims are more likely to turn violent.
Some of the reasons we're seeing more murder amongst women are, again, the fact that we have very disrupted family systems and women are exposed to abuse with phenomenal frequency. And we're living in a society where women are encouraged to express and be empowered and to take their feelings and act upon them.
1 out of every 4 women is the victim of a felonious assault by her spouse or living partner. That is not counting emotional, psychological, sexual, or financial abuse.
I frequently have patients say things like, I want to kill that person. And every case that occurs to me right now, every single one was a woman, and everyone was a profound trauma survivor. Profound.
Women who kill their husbands commit crimes that often go unreported. The reason can be summed up in one word: poison. For centuries, women have used poison as their favorite weapon, and it can be very hard to detect.
Which brings us here to San Diego and our first story.
It's a stranger-than-fiction tale about a couple who seem to have everything. She was the daughter of a former Department of Justice official who served under President Reagan. He was the son of a world-renowned plastic surgeon. They had movie star looks and plenty of ambition. Both Kristen and Gregory worked as scientists, and ironically, science took center stage in a case involving drugs, infidelity, and murder.
The body of Greg DeVillers was discovered in his bedroom on November 6, 2000. At first, police weren't sure Greg was the victim of a crime, but it didn't take long before suspicion fell on his wife, Kristen. So what happened that night? And did this blonde-haired, green-eyed beauty really kill her husband? To find out, we need to go back to the beginning, to 1976. That's when Kristen Rossum was born in Memphis, Tennessee. Her parents were both college professors. Ralph and Constance Rossum adored their little girl, and so did everyone else.
She was actually a model, a child model, and she was very, very attractive. She had these beguiling eyes.
When she turned 10, Kristen took ballet lessons and pursued dance with a passion. But in high school, a freak accident ruined Kristen's dream of a career on stage.
Another dancer dropped her, so she ended up with a stress fracture that just wouldn't heal, and she got frustrated and she quit.
Soon after that, Rossum began experimenting with drugs.
Kristen started smoking cigarettes, trying beer, maybe a little pot. She didn't like pot. And then right before homecoming, I think she was about 16, a girlfriend, and she were sitting in a car in a parking lot, and this girl drew a couple lines, and that was her first experience with speed, and she liked it.
Kristen developed a taste for crystal meth, and she continued the habit throughout her college years. In late 1994, Rossum took a quick trip to Mexico to score some drugs. That's when she met 21-year-old Gregory DeVillers.
She dropped her jacket and he went to pick it up, and that's how they started talking. He didn't have very much experience with girls. He's a good-looking guy. She was a pretty girl, and they got along well, and they went home and they did have sex that first night.
Kristen fell hard for DeVillers, who was a biology student at UC San Diego. The couple soon began living together in his campus apartment.
Kristen and her parents saw Greg as their saving angel because, you know, he did what the parents were not able to do, and that was to help get Kristen off drugs.
Greg also encouraged Kristen to transfer to San Diego State University. Then in June 1995, he proposed.
It was kind of a long engagement, and it was kind of on and off again, and Kristen had told some of her friends that, you know, she wasn't sure, she was having doubts.
Her demeanor was absolutely bizarre for a person getting married. She was not at all excited about this upcoming marriage.
Kristen and Greg finally tied the knot 4 years later in 1999.
I was stunned. I could not believe she went through with the wedding. And then she became extremely different in her personality. She had been outgoing, and now she was sort of strictly business. She was not happy. It was obvious.
The new bride threw herself into her studies, and the hard work paid off.
It was just about commencement time. She had just gotten this job, and I said, "What job? You got a job?" I was really surprised. And she told me, "Yes, I'm going to be working in the medical examiner's office as a toxicologist."
Kristen went to work in March 2000, soon after graduating summa cum laude from San Diego State. It was an exciting time, except for one thing. Kristen's relationship with her husband took a turn. Rossum later talked about those days in an interview on the TV news show 48 Hours.
About a year into our marriage, Greg became very, very clingy to me as I was trying to pull myself away and have some sort of sense of independence. He always wanted to keep tabs on me and stop me from having any independent life outside of our marriage.
Kristen spent more and more time at work. She was attracted to her new boss, Australian-born Michael Robertson. 30-year-old Robertson was smart, good-looking, and married, though he was estranged from his wife.
He provided me unconditional support and encouragement.
They started talking, and they started, you know, hanging out together as friends, and they respected each other, you know, professionally, and they also were attracted to each other. So it grew, I think, a mutual obsession.
Kristen and Michael tried to be discreet, but their colleagues soon caught on. So did Rossum's husband.
Greg already knew that she and Michael had some sort of relationship, emotional or otherwise, and Kristen had told him, and he'd actually called Michael on the phone and said, "Stay away from my wife."
It was too late. Kristen wanted a life with Michael.
We loved each other. We had talked about a future together. I wanted a trial separation to make sure I was making the right decision.
However, Greg wasn't ready to give up.
She said she wanted to go, and he said, "No, I want you to stay. Let's try to work this out."
Kristen stuck around, but she continued to see Michael. Then the night that changed everything, November 6th, 2000.
Fire medical dispatcher. My husband is not breathing.
I received a telephone call from our university dispatcher telling me that officers were out at the scene of a probable suicide.
When we return, the investigation intensifies and a deadly trail of deceit is exposed.
She'd be emailing her husband saying, "I love you," and then the next email out was to Michael Robertson, "I'll meet you here at such and such."
And later,
it gave me a creepy feeling, like it was like staring at me. I saw brownish red splatters going up the whole picture.
My husband is not breathing.
Is he in bed?
Yes.
Okay, can you take him off the bed and put him on the floor?
The date, November 6, 2000. The caller, Kristen Rossum. When University police and paramedics arrived, they found Kristen's husband, Gregory DeVillers, dead on the bedroom floor of their San Diego apartment. The body was strewn with rose petals. It looked like a scene from American Beauty, which was one of Kristen's favorite movies. But this was only the beginning of a case that took a series of strange twists.
Paramedics tried to resuscitate DeVillers. It was too late. Around 10 that night, Greg was taken to Scripps Memorial Hospital. Kristen followed in a squad car. Incredibly, she called her Australian lover, Michael Robertson, to meet her. Doctors officially pronounced DeVillers dead at 10:19 p.m. Rossum was holding hands with Robertson when she got the news. Back at the apartment, Detective Robert Jones tried to make sense of what happened. Was DeVillers so depressed that he took his own life? It looked that way. In addition to the rose petals, a wedding photo of Greg and Kristen sat next to Greg's body on the floor. Then there was Kristen's diary.
This journal that was found on the coffee table inside the apartment were entries that would indicate that she had been unhappy with her marriage for some time, and that Greg was not the person that she planned to be with the rest of her life, and that she wanted to move on.
Shortly before midnight, Kristen returned from the hospital with Michael Robertson.
She didn't look healthy. She was shaky. Her voice was shaky. She was almost incoherent. It was difficult for her to carry on a conversation.
Kristen told Detective Jones that her husband was asleep when she got home from work between 5 and 5:30 p.m. She said she left Greg a note. It read in part, "Hi, Sleepy. Hope you feel better."
Everything at the scene suggested that this was indeed a suicide. From the sleepy note to the journal to the way the apartment looked or didn't look, in the sense that there was no signs of a struggle.
Kristen claimed she went to buy a wedding present for her cousin and came back around 8. Greg was still asleep. Rossum said she then took a leisurely bath. Soon after that, she discovered something was very wrong with her husband.
I noticed that he wasn't breathing. I called 911.
Kristen later told police the dispatcher instructed her to lift her husband off the bed and put him on the floor.
Can you take him off the bed and put him on the floor?
According to Rossum, when she pulled back the covers, she noticed the rose petals on Greg's body. The wedding photo was next to him. But Kristen never explained how it got on the floor.
I gave him CPR and I tried to resuscitate him.
Miss Rossum painted a picture of Greg having taken some prescription drug that had originally belonged to her because he was depressed over their particular situation.
Detective Jones conducted what police call a preliminary inspection of the apartment. Jones was curious about the rose petals and what he found in the bathroom. Someone unscrewed the bathtub stopper. It was sitting on a shelf high above the tub.
Because the stopper was not the type you would easily remove, it caused me to question as to whether or not she had actually taken a bath. It caused me to question as to why she had possibly told me something that wasn't really true.
The next day, more doubt about Kristen's story. An autopsy revealed 3 needle marks on Greg's left arm. The paramedic acknowledged making only 2 puncture marks when he tried to revive Greg. Examiners also concluded that DeVillers had been unconscious since 7:30 the previous morning. Still, the question remained. What killed Greg DeVillers? The pieces soon started to fall in place.
The head of operations of the medical examiner's office decided, you know what? We're not going to do the toxicology because it's the husband of a toxicologist that died. We're going to send that out. And it was only when it was sent out to be tested, that's when they find the fentanyl.
Acute fentanyl intoxication was the cause of death. Fentanyl is a highly regulated narcotic. It's a painkiller. They use it in hospitals. The medical examiner's office kept fentanyl in a 10 milligram vial.
And Kristen worked for the medical examiner.
Fentanyl, very powerful. It's 100 times more potent than morphine. There was enough in his system to kill a couple dozen people.
The evidence mounted, suggesting murder, not suicide.
We received a call from one of Miss Rossum's co-workers at the coroner's office. He was calling to inform us, to let us know that Miss Rossum and one of her co-workers, Dr. Michael Robertson, were having an affair.
If Kristen did kill her husband, was Robertson the motive? And was fentanyl the smoking gun? At that point, campus police decided to turn the case over to San Diego PD. Homicide detective Lori Agnew brought Kristen in for questioning.
How did the interrogation go?
It was a very interesting interrogation. She came in, she did not look at all like what we were expecting. Basically, she walked in and I thought, my God, I'm looking at a drug addict.
Really? She looked strung out?
She looked, yes, and she was thin. She had the meth sores. She was unkempt. She looked awful. She did not look like the professional you were expecting to come for an interview.
Rossum told Detective Agnew she was smoking methamphetamine.
She never cried once during the interview. She did a lot of pretend crying, but there was never a tear shed. At a certain point, confront her with the fact that she was having an affair with her boss, Michael Robertson. And of course, she denied it.
And at what point did you call Michael Robertson in for questioning?
I talked with him about 2 days after I talked with her the first time.
What was his overall demeanor during the interrogation?
He was very cautious, very careful. We audio recorded his interview. You just listen to how carefully he phrased things. He really thought before he responded. There was no spontaneity in his answers.
According to author Caitlin Rother's book, Poisoned Love, Michael Robertson was fired from his job in early December 2000 for failing to report Kristen's use of illegal drugs. A month later, police say a warrant was issued to search Robertson's apartment. Cops also got a search warrant for the medical examiner's office. They seized Michael and Kristen's computers and checked for clues.
I could see a very passionate email between Kristen and Michael. And then a few minutes later, sometimes even just several seconds later, email between Kristen and the victim, her deceased husband, with a totally different sense to it, a different nuance.
She'd be emailing her husband, making plans for dinner and saying, I love you. And then the next email out was to Michael Robertson, I'll meet you here at such and such place, and, you know, we can do this and this.
Yes, I was having an affair with Michael Robertson.
I'm guilty of being unfaithful to my wife.
Evidence of an affair didn't necessarily point to murder, but then detectives found something chilling on Robertson's computer.
I happened to come across a search hit on fentanyl, and that really caught my eye. And it was how fentanyl had been stolen from a medical examiner's office and used to commit a homicide. When I saw that, the hair on the back of my neck kind of stood up.
We conducted an inventory of the drugs at the medical examiner's office. Kristen Rossum had logged in a full vial of fentanyl nitrate. When we went back and we did our independent audit, that drug was missing. All of it was gone.
Michael Robertson claimed he had nothing to do with the murder of Greg DeVillers, and in May 2001, cops allowed Robertson to fly to Australia to be with his dying mother. In the meantime, the evidence piled up against Kristen Rossum.
There was a Vons grocery store statement that had some interesting information. Tell me about that.
What we found in a grocery receipt through Vons was at 12:41 on November 6th. She went to Vons, used her little card. She bought some cold medicine, and then there was a single rose with baby breath that was purchased. And that was through their computer system that we discovered that.
Was this the source of the rose petals on and around Greg's body? Detectives weren't sure, but they believed Greg DeVillers was murdered and that Kristen Rossum committed the crime. A judge agreed and issued a warrant for her arrest. On Monday, June 25, 2001, Rossum was apprehended and charged with murder.
Do you believe that Kristen Rossum murdered her husband, Greg DeVillers?
Absolutely, yes.
When THS Investigates returns, a surprising move by the defense. Kristen Rossum takes the stand in a fight for her life.
I just want to shout at the top of my lungs, I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
Welcome back to THS Investigates Women Who Kill. In June 2001, 24-year-old Kristen Rossum faced murder charges in the death of her husband, Greg DeVillers. The prosecution intended to prove that Kristen was having an affair and that she poisoned Greg with a potent drug. Prosecutors also added special circumstances, which meant if convicted, Kristen was eligible for the death penalty. Kristen pled not guilty and was released on bail. It took more than a year for the case to come to trial. In October 2002, attorneys delivered opening statements in the case of the People versus Kristen Rossum.
This case had all the, the components of the three media food groups that had sex, drugs, and murder. And the press ate it up.
Our opening statement, I think, described how Kristen Rossum had a methamphetamine problem, how she then met this very charismatic young Australian, how the two of them began having an affair. In addition, we explained how there were drugs that were missing from the medical examiner's office.
Convicting Kristen Rossum of first-degree murder would not be easy. The prosecution's case was based entirely on circumstantial evidence, and Kristen now looked the part of the grieving widow, not a messed-up woman who messed around.
It was a circumstantial case, and it was against a young woman who had virtually no criminal record, who was a beautiful young lady, who was in a respected position, that came from a good family. It's very difficult sometimes for a jury to see somebody in court, cleaned up, looking well, who looks a lot like them or one of their neighbors.
For 2 weeks, the prosecution called a string of witnesses to the stand, including paramedics, homicide investigators, and Kristen's colleagues at the medical examiner's office. But prosecutors saved the best for last. On October 29, 2002, the younger brother of Greg DeVillers testified.
Jerome DeVillers was an extremely important witness for the prosecution. Jerome didn't think his brother would commit suicide, and he certainly didn't think he would do it by drugs, because he knew his brother not to use drugs, to be somebody that was against drugs, that got Kristen Rossum off of drugs, and that was not suicidal.
The defense tried to convince jurors that 26-year-old Kristen was as innocent as she looked. Kristen's parents, Ralph and Constance Rossum, were in court every day, and both took the stand to support their daughter.
There were times that their testimony seemed to conflict with reality. They seemed to want to talk more about their daughter's ballet and what a wonderful ballet star she was as a young child than this cold-blooded act heartless thing that she'd done by killing her husband.
In most murder trials, the defendant never testifies on advice from counsel. But Kristen Rossum insisted Greg somehow obtained enough drugs to commit suicide, and she wanted to tell her side of the story. With her blonde hair pulled back, Kristen looked fragile and anxious. The entire courtroom went silent as Rossum was sworn in.
Well, she tried to be controlled, I think, throughout most of the trial. She certainly knew that she was on display. There were some times when she appeared to think this was some type of publicity event rather than somebody that was charged with murder.
But that was just the warm-up for the real battle. On November 4th, 2002, Rossum faced a blistering cross-examination by prosecuting attorney Dan Goldstein.
The very first question that the prosecution asked Kristen Rossum was what drugs she had been taking. Right then, on the stand, and it clearly threw her. It was clearly something that she didn't expect. From then on, she gave her story, but it just simply wasn't credible.
Kristen regained her composure. Still, the damage was done.
The second day, she was much flatter, and her story just wasn't consistent with the facts. She just couldn't explain a lot of things.
The prosecutor dragged out all of Kristen's dirty laundry, including her alleged affair with Michael Robertson, the man described in court documents as her unindicted co-conspirator. Goldstein recounted the many lies Kristen told her husband. He said the CPR Rossum claimed she performed on Greg had been staged for the 911 operator. But the most damning evidence was the supermarket receipt, conclusive proof that Kristen bought a rose on the very day of what the media dubbed the Rose Petal murder.
Rose petals were spread all around Greg DeVillers' body, and we knew that Kristen Rossum's favorite movie, according to at least one witness, was American Beauty, which had a significant scene with rose petals being displayed all over someone.
I think it was just a symbol that that he thought, you know, the rumor it was over, that he understood that he was making a cry for help.
It was obviously extremely significant to us that she had just bought Rose on the day of the murder at 12:30 p.m.
Kristen's testimony raised more questions than it answered.
The body, which according to her story was originally on the bed at the time she made the 911 call, and then she was told to put it on the ground. Why, when the body was put on the ground, why did no rose petals, which she claimed were all over the body, why did none get under the body when the body went from the bed to the ground?
Jurors began deliberations on November 7th, 2002. 5 days later, on what would have been Greg DeVillers' 29th birthday, they returned with a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder.
I was watching Kristen the whole time. She sort of stood up from her chair ready to hear the judgment, and she was sort of shaking. And then when she heard the verdict, she kind of buckled. And when they took her out of the courtroom, she turned her head over her shoulder and she looked back at her parents sort of pleadingly, like, you know, can't you do something?
It didn't surprise me. I was confident that that's what the verdict would be. I have to express some bittersweet feelings. Two families really lost their children in this. The DeVillers family lost Greg. The Rossum family lost Kristen.
Marie DeVillers, the mother, and Jerome DeVillers, the older brother, and Bertrand DeVillers, they all stood up and gave actually very moving, touching statements. The gist of their statements was that, you know, she was evil and that she had killed their, you know, son and brother and seemed to have no remorse for it. And, you know, Greg had tried to help her and she repaid him by killing him. And
I ask myself every day, how did I go from that happy little girl to being in here facing murder charges?
A month later, Rossum was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Her attorneys immediately filed an appeal. Then in March 2003, the story took another strange turn. A man by the name of John Varnell told a friend about a phone call he received from someone he thought was Greg DeVillers.
The phone rang, and he says, "Are you the pastor?" I says, "No, my wife's pastor." He says, "Well, do you do any counseling?" I says, "Yes, I do."
Varnell couldn't remember exactly when he got the call, but Rossum's attorneys were notified and they paid Varnell a visit. He explained what the caller said next.
And his wife was fooling around on him. And she was working in some kind of a clinic. So was her boyfriend. He was just beside himself. He wanted to know what the Bible said about committing suicide. Then he began to tell me about something he'd read about Judas betraying Christ. Yeah, he says, if I just throw up a handful of rose petals, like representing the money that Judas threw down, and he repented and he went out and hung himself.
Armed with potential new evidence, Rossum's attorneys filed a writ of habeas corpus, allowing Rossum to use the call as part of her appeal.
I feel passionate because the wrong person's in jail for this. That he killed himself, or that other guy killed him, but she didn't.
I just want to shout at the top of my lungs, I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
But a judge disagreed. On June 13th, 2005, 4.5 years after the death of Greg DeVillers, Kristen Rossum lost her appeal for a retrial. And what about Rossum's lover, Michael Robertson? As far as the cops know, Robertson never returned to the U.S. from Australia.
The book still isn't closed. It's an open investigation.
So you would actually like to still press charges potentially against Michael Robertson?
We're still looking in that direction.
In the meantime, 29-year-old Kristen Rossum sits alone in a cell at Valley State Prison for Women in Chowchilla, California. She'll spend the rest of her life there.
Up next on THSI, a wild ride in a Mercedes that ends in tragedy. Was it murder or a terrible accident? Welcome back to THS Investigates Women Who Kill. For 44-year-old Clara Harris, life was good. She had a successful career, a loving family, and a beautiful home in a posh Houston suburb. But when Clara's husband admitted having an affair, a woman in love became a woman scorned. In July 2002, anger and jealousy turned to violence. Clara ran down and killed David Harris in a hotel parking lot. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but the story doesn't end there. Many people believe what happened was a terrible accident, not cold-blooded murder. And when you see what the jury didn't, you just might agree.
Prison was the last place Colombian-born beauty Clara Suarez expected to end up. Clara came to the U.S. in her 20s to attend Washington University in Houston. She earned a degree in dentistry. Next, Clara applied for a position at the University of Texas.
All the residents ganged up on our director and said, "This is the person for the residency next year. If you don't accept her, we all three quit."
Clara completed the residency program in June 1991. She took a job at Castle Dental Center, where she met a handsome orthodontist, David Harris. They married on Valentine's Day 1992. Their lives seemed to mesh perfectly.
Clara Harris and her husband, for many, many years, had an idyllic marriage. They were building an empire. They were building this huge dental practice.
David had a daughter from his first marriage, and in September 1998, the family grew. Clara gave birth to twin boys, Brian and Bradley. It was a happy time, especially for the new mom.
She and David struggled to have children for many years, and finally, through fertility, conceived two boys, twins. Doting mother, did all she could for them, and likewise was very attentive to her husband.
Clara continued to work and take care of things at home, while David expanded the business even more.
As the children became bigger and the practices started growing and David kept wanting to buy more and more practices, her life became very stretched.
But in early 2002, the marriage started to unravel. David began seeing his new receptionist, a young, attractive, divorced mother of three named Gail Bridges.
Here comes Miss Attentive Gail, and what man doesn't want a little bit more attention in his life? There was one weekend where Clara was going to Columbia, and she wanted to take one of the sons with her, so she asked David to take one of the twins. So the whole time that Clara was gone, David was gone. In fact, the nanny later said that she didn't see David hardly at all.
David and Gail at one point had gone to the Galleria in Houston and spent the night at a hotel there. And that occurred while Clara was in Columbia attending a cousin's wedding. And then they also had met at the Nassau Bay Hilton.
David's relationship with Gail soon became obvious to everyone in the office, except his wife.
What would happen is normally he would take some of the staff out for lunch, and Gail was always jumping in the car with them. She's wanting to sit in the front seat with him. She's wearing shorter skirts. She's flirting and saying, "Oh, David," and all this stuff. So, you know, it just made the rest of the staff very uneasy, and there were a couple of times where they just didn't want to go because they thought it was so inappropriate.
Finally, Clara heard about it.
An employee told her that she should be paying attention to her marriage, that she should take a look at what was going on between her husband and this woman who worked at his practice.
The affair apparently had been going on in David's orthodontist office, so the staff there knew, and the staff at that time of the year included Clara's stepdaughter, Lindsay, who was 16 at the time. She would live with David and Clara in the summers and worked at the office. She even knew, so I think that she was very hurt by that whole finding out that she was the last one to know.
She was thinking she was building this future practice with David, and he's actually breaking it down more in the process.
Clara confronted David. He confessed, sort of.
When Clara first heard the news, she was sitting down in the bathroom and she started crying, and David was telling her, "I want to work this out." She said, "Well, who is it?" And that's when he told her it was Gail, and Clara, you know, was asking, "Do you love her?"
That is one of the most bizarre things imaginable. He told her that there was another woman, but he didn't indicate in the initial admission that they had made love. He let her just kind of squeeze the details out of him.
Clara wanted desperately to believe David's story, that the relationship was not sexual. She agreed to give him a second chance, but only if he fired Gail. The discussion quickly turned into a heated argument.
There was an altercation. She was pushed down. She was physically bruised. He didn't want to go to the office and fire her.
He said, well, you handle it, I'm staying out of it. So they go down to the office together, and Clara pulls Gail into a room, and she said, you know, I know you're having an affair with my husband, and Gail keeps saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Clara said, you know, you're fired, that's it, here's your check, get out of the office. And that's probably a cleaned up version.
Gail was out of a job, but she wasn't out of David's life, as Clara soon realized. Gail later testified in court that David told her he and Clara had an open marriage and that she thought Clara knew the relationship was sexual all along.
She felt stupid, she felt abused, neglected, taken for granted.
Clara decided to take some drastic steps.
This woman went on a crash diet. She tried to remake herself. She bought sexy clothes. She read Dr. Phil books.
She dyed her blonde because David liked blondes. She had inquired with a plastic surgeon about having breast augmentation, had gone to and signed up at a gym and hired a personal trainer, and had even gone so far as to cancel all her patients for several weeks.
I think Clara Harris was a victim of American Beauty, and the sense that she felt that she had no worth without her husband validating who she was.
Clara still believed she could save her marriage, but David was hard to please.
So David starts up the notorious list of you're fat, you don't pay enough attention to me, you don't accept what I say, basically like Gail listens to me. Gail agrees with everything I say. He just starts this whole list and just makes me sick that my girlfriend, who's perfect in every way, is having to listen to this. But she did, and she starts her list. You know, I'm going to get breast augmentation and liposuction, and I'm going to quit my job for 2 weeks and maybe forever, and I'm going to just, you know, be this doting, perfect wife.
Clara meant every word. She made arrangements to go under the knife. David seemed to like the idea.
They had this wonderful romantic evening. David was telling her, you know, I'm going to end this affair and we're going to start this beautiful new life all over again where we're very focused on each other, and I love you so much.
He decided that he was going to break off the affair with Gail, but he wanted to meet with Gail and tell her face to face what was going on.
And she's like, why? Why don't you do this over the phone? I don't want you to see her. And he said, no, I owe it to her. I want to make it final. It will be more final if I can do it in person. And she said, okay.
And the plan was that they were going to have dinner at Perry's Steakhouse in the Clear Lake area. That was a place that apparently Gail and David had been on occasion.
David promised Clara he would break up with Gail on July 24th, 2002. When THS Investigates returns, we'll look at the video that shocked a community.
It's chilling. Absolutely chilling.
We'll also show you what the judge refused to admit into evidence.
What's your celebrity IQ? Here's your chance to test your knowledge. Play Paparazzi, the DVD celebrity trivia game. Buy it now at eonline.com.
New on DVD, Herbie Fully Loaded.
Dad, what are we doing here?
Buying you a car? One girl's dream
All I've ever wanted to do is race.
seemed out of reach.
Amateur hour's over.
Until Herbie showed her that anything is possible.
It's pretty nasty out there.
Unbelievable! I'm so proud of you. Herbie Fully Loaded. Own it today on Disney DVD.
This is the new Pond's, an incredibly effective anti-aging line that'll give the 40s a whole new look. To all you 20-somethings, we just have one thing to say. Look out.
When the weather turns colder, the female begins to feed liberally. Though shocking in its excess, this will get her through the long months ahead. She will survive the hibernation well. All the best brands and styles, DSW.
Febreze eliminates odors, leaving your car fresh.
Know a cool mom who deserves a celebration? Then mominate her at CoolHouse.com to win a party from Febreze.
Is Clara Harris telling the truth? Ask her friends.
I have gotten Clara drunk. I have tried everything I can to beat holes in Clara's story because I wasn't going to go on national TV and be her representative if I didn't have every detail.
Stay right where you are. THS Investigates will be back.
3, 2, 1, lift off.
Explore the flavor. Bacardi Coco, coconut-flavored rum.
Based on the best-selling novella by Steve Martin.
If this were a TV dating show, would I be kicked off already?
The nation's top critics are applauding Shop Girl. Ebert and Roper give it 2 thumbs up.
You look like an angel.
It's the finest performance of Steve Martin's career, and the New York Times calls Claire Danes flawless. She'll be hard to beat at Oscar time. Shop Girl, rated R.
Get ready to have the time of your life.
Now playing in select cities.
Okay, y'all tied off? Yeah, I got it. Are you sure about this, man? I got a cousin with a long ladder.
Jimmy, you're bigger than me. It's gonna be fine, man. I'm just gonna drop down, paint that last bit.
All right.
People don't always use common sense.
1.
Fortunately, there's a healthcare company that does. United Healthcare brings common sense to healthcare. We offer affordable health benefit solutions, quality and cost comparison tools, and live and online chats with medical experts. United Healthcare. It just makes sense.
Will you ever find the person who will change your life? Yes. At Match.com, we created a new guide to show you how. It's called How to Find the Right Person in 90 Days. A step-by-step guide based on millions and millions of successful relationships we've inspired over the past 10 years. Now for a limited time, you can get it free. With Match.com and the power of our new guide, you will meet that special someone. Change your life today. Get our new guide, free, only at Match.com.
This portion of E brought to you by Match.com. 15 million passionate people. The #1 site to find a serious relationship. Visit Match.com today.
Welcome back to THS Investigates Women Who Kill. By the summer of 2002, Clara Harris was a desperate woman on a mission to save her marriage. She begged her husband to end his affair with his former receptionist, Gail Bridges, and he said he would. But David made the same promise at least 4 times before. So this time, Clara decided to make sure. She hired a private investigation firm.
She was very calm, very determined about what she wanted, but nothing, crazy or weird or odd. She gave us the hotel, the 2 restaurants, and the other woman's address. She even had a picture of the other woman.
Around 5:30 p.m. on July 24, 2002, David Harris left the house. David told Clara he was meeting Gail at a nearby steakhouse, but that's not where he went. Investigators followed Harris to a local hotel. A few miles away, Clara and her 16-year-old stepdaughter, Lindsay, were on their way to the mall. But Clara thought David might be lying again.
Throughout the evening, Lindsay and Clara were driving around the Clear Lake area to different restaurants that they knew Gail and David had been to with no success. They had even driven by Gail's house because Lindsay knew where she lived.
There was no sign of David or Gail. Then, Clara got a call from the PI.
The gentleman from Blue Moon, the private detective agency, called her and told her that David and Gail were at the Nassau Bay Hilton.
Our investigators are sitting in the car, they're filming as much as they can without being spotted, and then they're going into the hotel trying to get close because Clara asked us to get close.
Clara couldn't believe David picked that spot to take his mistress. She told Lindsay to forget the shopping trip and drive straight to the hotel.
The Nassau Bay Hilton held a special place in Clara's heart because that's where she and David had their wedding reception.
I can only ask my clients and have it in contracts not to go there, which we did. It was a total surprise to us that she was out at the location.
Finally, she spots Gail's Lincoln Navigator in the parking lot of the Hilton and David's Suburban. She keys the Navigator, scratches the Navigator with keys. She bends some trailer hitch thing on it. She bends the windshield wipers.
All of Clara's anger, you have to realize, is very directed at Gail. She wants it to work with David.
With Lindsay at her side, Clara stormed into the hotel. David was already upstairs with Gail, but Clara had other plans for him.
She has David's daughter call her father on his cell phone. He answers. And she tells him that one of the children, one of the twins, is sick and he needs to get home, and he says he will.
A few minutes later, Clara called David. He said he was at the restaurant and would be home shortly. The outrageous lie made Clara even more furious.
When he and his lover came down the elevator and opened the elevator doors, Clara saw this. She went ballistic. She attacked her, wrestled her to the floor, pulled her blouse off, a real fight.
Clara even crawled over and bit her leg at one point.
David jumps on top of Clara, and he's actually holding Clara's head while Clara is clawing at and trying to get at Gail. And Lindsay's behind with her purse, trying to hit David with her purse, screaming, "I hate you, Daddy, I hate you, Daddy."
The hotel bell captain stepped in and broke up the fight. David made a monumental decision.
He turns and picks up Gail, and mind you, he walks off with Gail, and he leaves his daughter a sobbing mess on the floor of the hotel.
He made his choice then, and he went with the lover rather than the wife.
Clara and Lindsay were escorted to their car. By this point, Clara was hysterical. She threw her Mercedes into gear and barreled towards Gail's SUV parked behind the hotel.
We're out in the car waiting for our subject to come out.
Her whole intent of driving to the back parking lot where Gail's car was to block it so that she wouldn't leave with her husband.
I don't believe for a second that Clara Harris was going for the car.
Mercedes comes around the bend really at a fast rate. It's making the corner, and it just takes a sharp right and charges right for the Navigator.
A hotel security guard tried to intercept the speeding car, but Clara was driving too fast.
There was an empty parking space next to Gail's Navigator. She whipped into that empty parking space, and at the time, the driver's side door was open.
David had just put Gail into the Navigator, and he pushed her in just seconds before Clara hit him. She scraped by the Navigator, but she hit David dead on.
The body flew from the impact, and then the car continued to kind of go over medians that were in the parking lot, and she continued to go in circles. Lindsay, who was the front seat passenger in the car during all this time, was also screaming, "Stop, stop, stop."
And mind you, that this body was being run over by a car that had only 6 inches clearance to the ground. So when that car went over him, it was a meat grinder.
The Mercedes circled 3 more times. To horrified onlookers, it looked like Clara ran over David again and again and again. Finally, she slammed on the brakes, jumped out of the car, and rushed over to her husband's mangled body.
He was still very much alive at the scene. His lungs had collapsed. He was gurgling. He couldn't speak. She reached inside of his mouth, being a dentist, and teeth fell out in her hands, and she lost it. She knew what she had done to him at that point, and I think was overwhelmed with regret at what she had done.
David Harris died 15 minutes later in the emergency room of an area hospital. The cops arrested Clara that same night. She was charged with murder and released on $30,000 bond. The graphic video shot by the PIs played over and over again on newscasts across the country. When we come back,
his daughter describes the look of terror on her father's face at that moment. It's chilling.
On a sweltering summer day in 2002, cops in Houston arrested 44-year-old Clara Harris for murdering her husband. Some people saw David Harris as a victim. Others said he cheated on his wife, and that made him fair game. Either way, Clara faced serious prison time. She hired one of Houston's top guns, attorney George Parnham, to mount her defense. The trial kicked off in late January 2003.
George was sick, quite ill during the trial. He had the flu. He actually collapsed in the courtroom.
the prosecution painted Clara as a jealous woman out for revenge, who mowed down her husband and then ran over him 3 times. The grainy video taken by the private eyes seemed to support the prosecution's case. So did Clara's stepdaughter, Lindsay, when she took the stand.
The last thing that David did was put his hand on the hood. His daughter described the look of terror on her father's face at that moment. It's chilling, absolutely chilling. She describes the difference in the way the car felt when it hit a cement curb and when it hit the soft tissue of a body.
But that wasn't all. Lindsay testified that as the Mercedes speeded towards Gail's SUV, Clara shouted, "I'm going to hit him."
When she came around the car and said, "I'm going to hit him," whether she said it as an derogatory or an exclamatory, she acknowledged that she saw him.
Defense attorney George Parnham countered by arguing that Lindsay had it all wrong. In fact, Parnham used Lindsay's testimony to help make his case that what happened was an accident.
One of the guards was walking over to where Gail and them were, and he sees that Clara's coming, and he is getting ready to hit the car to stop her from driving over in that direction. And Clara turns to Lindsay and says, "I'm going to hit him." She's not talking about, "I'm going to go hit David." She's going to go ram Gail's car so Gail can't leave with her husband.
To further prove his theory, Parnham offered up a computerized video reenactment of the events. We obtained a copy of that tape, which paints a very different picture than the grainy video shot by the private eye. Take a look.
The reenactment video shows it from an overhead viewpoint where you can take into account the landmarks, the tire tracks, the location of the body, the car tracking, the radius measurements, all of that. Whereas from the video, all you see is someone bouncing over medians, thinking it looks like they're hitting a body. Immediately upon hitting David, she hits a curb, so her car bounces up into the air, and Clara has told me, "I saw David go off to the left." She thought he ran in front of the car. What she doesn't know is that he's now upon the grill of her car. And she hits this curb, her car goes up, she can't see anything.
The video showed the Mercedes landing on the other side of the median. It also showed Clara driving in circles without hitting David's body again.
When you hit something really hard, you close your eyes. Well, she just said, "Shelley, I don't even know what they're talking about because all I remember is just having my eyes closed and I just turned the wheel as tight as I could."
The reenactment video seemed to contradict the prosecution's case, but Judge Carol Davies refused to admit the tape into evidence.
There was one calculation that was a little bit off that they proved, and they showed how you could correct that calculation. So that discredited it in the judge's mind a tiny bit.
Even so, a collision expert testified that the turning radius on Clara's sedan made it impossible for her to hit David Harris more than once. The trial lasted less than a month, and on February 12, 2003, the jury began deliberations. The 3 men and 9 women pored over the evidence.
When the police department came in, their accident reconstruction showed us information which proved that she had run over him a couple of times. You could see it on the under train of the car.
They can only prove one definite tire mark across the back of the ear and the shoulders. All of the tire marks are not on the body, they're out around there. She just locks the wheel, and it's shown by the physics that that is the tightest radius that car can make.
Testimony by eyewitnesses varied between 2 and 5 times.
Then there was the defendant, Clara Harris.
So many of us did feel very sympathetic for her. You couldn't help but like her. We could have given her anywhere from probation to 20 years.
Most would agree that she probably didn't intend to kill him. And on the flip side, also agreed that his indiscretions should not have resulted in death.
In the end, jurors could not ignore one crucial fact.
Regardless of how mad or angry that you are, you can't take another person's life.
On February 13th, 2003, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty. The next day, Clara was sentenced to 20 years in prison, exactly 11 years after her Valentine's Day wedding to David. But the strange story continues to captivate people, and the court of public opinion is still out. Our next story takes place here in Sin City, a mecca for gamblers. But for a wealthy local couple caught up in a deadly game of deceit and murder, all bets were off. We begin back in December 1994 with the mysterious disappearance of real estate mogul Ron Rudin. Friends and co-workers feared the worst. Ron's wife, Margaret, didn't seem worried at all.
This kind of sent a red flag up to me because I'm wondering, why isn't there more concern here?
It made the hair on my neck stand up. I knew that something terrible had happened.
Ron Rudin liked to play his cards close to the vest. The 64-year-old real estate investor lived right around the corner from his office, just west of the famous Strip.
He kind of had a little fortress and kept everything close together.
Ron Rudin was very much a product of Las Vegas. This was a man who came to Vegas in the early 60s from the Midwest and saw opportunity in the desert. He bought and sold houses and condominiums, and he rehabbed them and resold them. He made himself a millionaire.
Rudin knew how to package a deal. He also had a way with the ladies.
Women fell for him. He would flatter them. He would give them gifts. He was a pretty good-looking, silver-haired guy, dashing.
He was very tall. He was around 6'2". He had a beautiful complexion. He had a wonderful smile, and he was very gentle, shy.
But the Silver Fox wasn't always so charming. By 1987, Rudin had married and divorced 4 times. Carolyn was wife number 2.
When he drank, he became a different person. He didn't become an abusive person, but he became a different person, and it was hurting our relationship. So we both mutually decided to part ways.
Ron Rudin was a man in black, literally. He dressed in black. He drove a black Cadillac. He had always this sort of black aura about him. He collected guns. He was always paranoid. He was a heavy drinker. He could be obsessive. He could be controlling. He went through a bunch of women.
In May 1987, Rudin met a petite blonde named Margaret Mason at church.
She passes herself off as a Southern belle who's from old money, and she's not, but she wants people to think that.
It turned out Margaret Mason was a Southerner from Memphis, Tennessee. But the rest of her story didn't add up. Reportedly, Margaret spent much of her time looking for a rich husband, search that eventually brought her to Las Vegas and Ron Rudin. The couple clicked right away, or so it seemed. When THS Investigates returns, a grisly end to a promising beginning.
What police found was a human barbecue pit.
In the spring of 1987, 44-year-old Margaret Mason met Las Vegas real estate developer Ron Rudin. Rudin was 56, rich, and available.
He was extremely mysterious, very charismatic.
That summer, Ron and Margaret said their vows at the Mission of the Bells Chapel. It was the 5th marriage for both Rudin and Mason. The honeymoon didn't last long.
There were problems from the very beginning. I would talk to him on a regular basis, and he would start telling me that she was out at night, like she would leave the house at midnight.
I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. You know, by then I knew that he was drinking a lot.
Very early on, Margaret found out that Ron was probably screwing around. She started listening in on the other phone line to his conversations. One night, she listened to him having sex talk with another woman. They got in this big argument. The argument became physical. They grabbed for a gun. The gun went off. Nobody got shot. And after that, Ron filed for divorce.
Then Ron noticed that a .22 caliber pistol vanished from his collection.
When he detected the gun was missing, he said the only person that could have been there was Margaret.
By May 1989, Ron and Margaret were trying to reconcile. Ron decided to withdraw the divorce petition. Still, he couldn't ignore his wife's suspicious behavior.
He changed his trust. If there was anyone that was going to inherit any money that participated in his demise, they would not inherit anything. It was like he was a prophet.
Though they still lived together, by 1994, Ron and Margaret Rudin led separate lives. And suspicion cut both ways.
Ron did have outside affairs, and she was concerned about that.
That could possibly be a reason why Mrs. Rudin may have been upset with her husband.
Margaret bought these little listening devices, 2 of them. She installed one in Ron's office, one in his secretary's office, and then she listened in on their conversations. She bugged Ron because she suspected, rightfully, that he was having affairs. It became an obsession with her. She hired a private investigator who followed Ron, told Margaret Rudin that her husband was having an affair.
According to author Michael Fleeman, Margaret was furious. She sent 2 angry letters to the children of Ron's mistress.
He did tell me about the letter that Margaret wrote to the woman's family that almost destroyed the woman, almost destroyed her family. And he knew full well that Margaret was the one that had done it.
In mid-December 1994, Ron and his girlfriend met to talk about the letters. The same day, Margaret celebrated the grand opening of a new business venture.
This antique shop was going to be a hobby for Margaret. This was something that was going to release her from her boredom. That was one thing that she said that she had gotten in arguments with Ron about.
The weekend before Ron disappeared, an awful lot of things happened. He figured out Margaret was sending the letters. Ron then drove to the mini mall where Margaret was having the grand opening of this antique store that she so badly wanted and that Ron had pumped a lot of money into. They had a very tense encounter. They sort of glowered at each other.
On Monday morning, December 19th, Rudin's staff came to work as usual, but the doors were locked, and there was no sign of Ron Rudin.
We knew something was wrong. He would just not show up and let anyone know.
Ron's bookkeeper notified Las Vegas PD. A call was then made to the Rudin home.
When I first called Margaret, it just very much surprised me at how unconcerned she seemed to be. Normally you would expect the wife or at least a family member to come in and want to report them missing.
Police began an official investigation, but several days passed before Margaret Rudin finally agreed to talk. It was the first of several meetings with detectives.
Anytime that we interviewed Mrs. Rudin, she seemed somewhat evasive. When Mrs. Rudin had mentioned her husband in the past tense, it was kind of set off a little light in our heads that she might know something that we don't know.
While cops searched for clues, Margaret seemed to be getting on with her life. She even started redecorating projects around the house. On December 26, 1994, exactly 1 week after Ron disappeared, his black Cadillac turned up in the parking lot behind the Crazy Horse Strip Club.
When the car was found, it was filthy. Ron never had a dirty car. I felt the car was planted.
We spoke with some of his closest friends, and they told us Ron wouldn't go to a topless club. As we got into the investigation, we determined that that was to throw us off track.
Once the vehicle showed up and We weren't able to determine, how it got there. That probably would have indicated to us that it might be a lot more serious than just a person that took off for a few days.
I didn't really believe that Ron would be coming back. Once his car was found, I believed it was foul play.
Around the same time, police got a hot tip from an unlikely source.
A young man named Augustine Lovato called, told us that he had been employed by Margaret as a day laborer to come over and clean her house. Right after Ron had disappeared, he was directed by Margaret to move the bed that they had slept in, to remove some carpeting from the bedroom, and to dispose of all of these items.
There was what I thought was blood on the carpet, and when I was cutting through it, this scabby type material kept sticking to me. It looked like dried blood.
Lovato also noticed what looked like blood on a picture of Margaret hanging in her bedroom.
It gave me a creepy feeling, like it was staring at me. I saw brownish red splatters going up the whole picture. And then when I saw that, I put the carpet and those two together and went, wow.
Police obtained a warrant and searched the premises.
We found areas of blood, visible blood, that were spattered on several areas.
Detectives questioned Margaret again. She said her husband had frequent nosebleeds. But there was another possible source of the blood.
It turns out that one of Ron's previous wives had committed suicide in the bedroom. And her blood evidence was still on that wall years later.
From there, the trail went cold until the night of January 21st, 1995. That's when some fishermen made a gruesome discovery here at Nelson's Landing, about 40 miles south of Las Vegas.
They're just shining their flashlights to see where they're going. All of a sudden, the flashlight beam hits a skull, and these guys freak out. Drove like crazy back to Las Vegas, called the police.
When we got to the scene, we examined the skull, and we could see in the back of the skull that there were bullet holes.
What police found was a human barbecue pit. They found charred remains, burnt bone, singed skull, not very much left, clearly a human body.
Then, not far away, detectives stumbled on a surprising clue.
Right next to the skull, on the ground, was a diamond bracelet.
And on this bracelet, in little jewels, was the name Ron.
I found a jeweler that would make a lovely white gold identification bracelet with his name in diamonds. And that's what I gave him for our second wedding anniversary. He loved that gift. And he always wore it up until the day he was murdered.
He was called Margaret Rudin's secret boyfriend, and police believed he was somehow connected to the death of Ron Rudin.
Now, breaking years of silence, a man who claims to be a former Israeli intelligence agent tells all in his first ever TV interview when THS Investigates returns.
All of a sudden, she pulls the gun.
Welcome back to THS Investigates Women Who Kill. Late on the night of January 21st, 1995, 4 men on a fishing trip made a grisly discovery not far from where I'm standing. They found a human skull near a blackened fire pit littered with charred bones. Close by, an expensive gold bracelet with the name Ron spelled out in diamonds.
The person or persons that placed him there expected his body in the trunk to burn completely, and that the bracelet would not burn, and therefore that would be his identity.
With the discovery of Ron Rudin's body, the case officially changed from missing person to homicide. Detective Phil Ramos broke the news to Ron's wife, Margaret.
She just kind of paused for a second and looked at me, and she goes, "Oh my gosh." And then she started rubbing her eye like this, and I'm watching her, trying to figure out if maybe there's something in her eye, and then she just keeps digging into her eye. And it occurred to me that she was trying to make herself cry.
Ron's wife was already a suspect, and her strange behavior only made the cops more suspicious. They put a tail on Margaret.
Throughout the course of the surveillance,
She was acting in a suspicious manner. She would make phone calls on her cell phone. Then she would drive around and go to different convenience stores and make phone calls on the pay phones outside. She gave the impression that she didn't want anyone to know who she was calling.
Then, in late January 1995, Margaret left Las Vegas to attend her husband's funeral in Illinois. 40-year-old Yehuda Sharon drove her to the airport. When Margaret returned a few days later, cops photographed the couple together. But who was this mystery man? And was he somehow involved in the death of Ron Rudin?
Yehuda Sharon would hang out at the Las Vegas Country Club, which is an exclusive private club that Margaret belonged to.
He would hook up with older, rich women, provide them with assistance and a shoulder to cry on. He gave them financial advice, even though he wasn't an accountant. He gave them computer advice, even though his computer skills were somewhat suspect. Cops just said, look, he is a gigolo. And one day he met Margaret Rudin, and they developed a relationship.
I was involved with him as a friend. That doesn't mean there's anything romantically involved.
Now 51, Yehuda Sharon told me his side of the story in his first TV interview.
I met Margaret in the Las Vegas Country Club, and she was sitting with a girlfriend of her, and she turned around and she says, you can come join us.
What was your first impression of her?
I thought she was a very attractive woman because, I mean, she really put herself together.
What do you think the nature was truly of Margaret's interest in you?
I was going to put her business on computers.
Sharon says he quickly saw a very different side of Margaret Rudin.
After her husband disappeared, she brought me all the financial papers. She brought me about 3.5 boxes of financial papers, and she wanted me to help her with the community property. One time, I took her with me to a lawyer and a CPA. Just about midway going there, all of a sudden she pulls the gun and she puts it between her and me. So I go ahead and I said, Margaret, what is this for? And she goes and she says, just in case Ron's crony are going to show up. I didn't trust her with the gun.
Sharon wasn't the only one who was suspicious of Mrs. Rudin. The cops turned up the heat on Margaret. They returned to the Rudin home for another search. This time, they found more blood.
We were focusing on the bedroom area where we believed Mr. Rudin had been shot and killed. Our CSIs did an examination of the wall and found trace blood evidence on the walls, on the ceiling, and along the floor. And once that occurred, we really began to focus on Margaret because we were able to determine that Mr. Rudin was murdered in his bedroom, on his bed while he was asleep.
Police believed Rudin was killed on December 18, 1994, the day before he was reported missing. Detectives also felt that someone helped Margaret dispose of the body, namely Yehuda Sharon. But Sharon says he was nowhere near the Rudin home.
Yehuda's alibi for the night of the murders was he was spending the night with yet another woman.
Well, I happened to spend that evening with Annie.
A Clark County grand jury began investigating Ron Rudin's death in the spring of 1995. Yehuda Sharon was a suspect, but he swore he wasn't involved.
I didn't do anything to do with the murder. I didn't help Margaret dispose of the body, and that's what the case was.
Prosecutors pushed harder. They offered Sharon a deal.
They gave him immunity, and he gave up nothing.
Margaret was setting me up. So I guess the prosecutor was trying to go ahead and get me angry against Margaret and go ahead and testify against her.
It was a dreadful mistake to give Yehuda Sharon immunity without knowing what he knew.
I still believe that the evidence points to Yehuda being involved.
Absolutely not. But she accused me of killing her husband.
In July 1996, the case took a surprise turn. A scuba diver found a gun at the bottom of Lake Mead. It turned out to be the same gun that disappeared from Ron Rudin's collection back in 1987.
Our firearms examiner test-fired it and examined the bullets microscopically, and he realized that he had seen those bullets before. Well, it turns out that the bullets that were found in Ron's skull at the scene matched the bullets that came out of this gun that was found out at the lake. And the connection there was almost chilling, and it was just a stroke of luck.
But there was no conclusive evidence to suggest Margaret Rudin stole the weapon or that she committed a crime. Detectives kept digging.
Ron Rudin had a directive in his trust that specified that if he died under unusual circumstances, that the trustees were to use everything in the trust to try to investigate and find his killer. And he had further confided it to his attorney when he put that directive into his trust agreement that the person that they should be looking at was Margaret Rudin.
There was not enough evidence to indict Margaret Rudin during the first grand jury hearing in 1995, but the discovery of the suspected murder weapon gave prosecutors more to go on. In February 1997, witnesses were called in a new grand jury proceeding.
We presented that Margaret Rudin had begun planning a murder of her husband, Ron Rudin, several years before. She had told a number of people about her interest in his money.
The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough to convince the grand jury. Finally, on April 18, 1997, 53-year-old Margaret Rudin was indicted on murder charges. A no-bail warrant was issued for her arrest.
I called Margaret's attorney and told him, can you please surrender her? He has no idea where she is.
Margaret hit the road. She went to Mexico. She went to Arizona.
Margaret's Vanishing Act made national headlines. That June, John Walsh featured the story on America's Most Wanted.
Now we're going after a woman who seems like a Hollywood character. Cops say she's a gold-digging black widow.
Viewers were fascinated by Margaret Rudin. She could be very charming, but she was very ruthless, and she would change her appearance from flashy and sexy to kind of dowdy.
Margaret Rudin is a chameleon. She's been a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead. These surveillance photos caught the grieving widow with her secret boyfriend at the Los Angeles airport.
Yehuda Sharon denies that he was Margaret's lover.
I got caught off guard with this altogether. People didn't understand that here I am on America's Most Wanted, and I'm not being arrested.
The TV exposure generated plenty of interest in the case.
If you've seen this accused killer, call 1-800-CRIME-TV.
But Margaret Rudin remained a fugitive. Then, in August 1998, an America's Most Wanted viewer in Arizona phoned police with a tip. Margaret was in Phoenix. City police paid a visit to a woman named Annette Boatwright, a.k.a. Margaret Rudin.
Officers went out, knocked on her door, and Margaret answered the door, and she convinced them that it wasn't her. She showed them some phony ID, and the officers were scratching their heads, and she said, "Oh no, officer, it can't possibly be me."
Margaret Rudin had such good ID, such good fake ID, and was such a cool cucumber, she was able to convince those cops that she wasn't Margaret Rudin, and she got away.
Finally, in November 1999, after 2.5 years on the lam, Margaret Rudin ran out of luck. Detectives tracked her down at an apartment in Revere, Massachusetts, where she was living under the alias Lee Simmons. Rudin gave up without a struggle.
Margaret Rudin thought she could get away with it, and I always say it, you can run, but you can't hide.
16 months later, in early March 2001, the Ron Rudin murder case finally went to trial.
I did not kill my husband, and I have total confidence that's what the jury will return.
During the trial, we described Margaret Rudin as having ice water in her veins.
I was preparing for Judgment Day, and I knew it was going to come.
The trial lasted 2 months, and on May 2nd, jurors filed back into the courtroom after deliberating for a week.
Have you arrived at a verdict?
Yes, sir, we have.
Guilty.
Margaret Rudin was convicted of first-degree murder.
I felt that justice had been achieved.
There is a moral to the story of Margaret Rudin. Justice delayed is not justice denied.
Margaret Rudin sits in the Southern Nevada Correctional Facility. She still maintains her innocence. So what drives women to kill? When THS Investigates returns, we'll ride along with a private investigator who points the finger at cheating spouses.
Coming up next, a
private investigator tracks a cheating spouse.
There is a lot of domestic violence associated with infidelity.
I just have to be careful because he was threatening that he's going to burn the house. He's going to hurt my parents.
Don't go away. THS Investigates will be right back.
Oh! Oh, yeah, come on with it now. Let me see what you got. Give it to me. Show enough funk, yeah. Let me tell you something. We came here just to get down. Been a while, but we're back in town. Don't hold back, just
Brooke Savage says, make mine a Fittig. Want younger looking skin in just 14 days? Revlon age-defying makeup with Bodifirm. Reduce lines up to 50% in just 2 weeks. Age-defying makeup with Bodifirm from Revlon.
Oh no, he must be out of toilet paper. Hold on, little fella, I'm coming.
With new Cottonelle Triple Roll toilet paper, they won't run out so often.
Huh? I don't get it.
It's 3 times longer than Cottonelle Single Roll and still fits on your usual dispenser.
Ah, now I get it. There you go, buddy. And there are plenty of cuddles left for me.
Cottonelle, looking out for the family.
The king is going all out, laying it on the line with BK Chicken Fries. Grab the new all-white meat 12-piece and score a free medium fries and drink. Get in the game quick, the clock is ticking on this deal.
At Samuel Adams, we do 10,000 beer audits in the course of a year.
We test the temperature, we look at the color.
Bartenders think we're crazy.
They're just looking at the head, looking at everything, and I don't know what they're looking for.
We check the lines in the faucets. And we also go and check Sam Adams' keg dates downstairs. If it's not fresh, we buy it back.
When we have festivals here, we put out-of-code beer in the tank.
People try to throw a ball and dunk Jim in some old Sam Adams.
I'd rather put people into stale beer than stale beer into people.
What's better than having a McCarthy sister? Having 2 McCarthy sisters. Party at the Palms with host Jenny McCarthy. All new Wednesday at 10, only on E!
Welcome back to THS Investigates Women Who Kill. You've met Kristen Rossum, Clara Harris, and Margaret Rudin and heard their tragic stories. But what do these 3 women have in common? In each case, infidelity resulted in murder. Of course, many married couples have affairs and no one ends up dead. Still, cheating often leads to an emotional meltdown. To find out more, I spent the day with Private Eye Alex Salazar in Pomona, California.
Well, infidelity doesn't discriminate. Infidelity occurs in very poor neighborhoods and obviously in the most affluent and richest areas.
Most of Salazar's clients know something is wrong, and it's his job to find out what. A lot of the stories have a familiar ring.
He used to go out with his friends and he would not come back for a day and a half.
They sense that something's not right because they're not affectionate, they're not having sex as much anymore, they're being mean, they're getting dressed up different.
He was disappearing for a day, day and a half. Basically, with spots on his underwear.
Confrontation is often followed by denial.
That many times is the problem with these cases is where you get a boyfriend or girlfriend that tells them, oh, you're just insecure, it's all in your head, you're crazy. When you start hearing those things, you sometimes start believing it.
Salazar has seen how extramarital affairs can destroy a marriage, especially when a cheating spouse is caught in the act. All right, so where are we going right now?
I want to stay back a little bit because we've already followed this person previously. It's critical that we set up close enough to where we can see the subject leaving or going somewhere.
Now, where is the subject coming out from right now that we're waiting for him?
He's going to be coming out of the school parking lot. He's a school teacher. He usually likes to take off for a lunch break, a lunchtime rendezvous.
Surveillance sometimes drags on for weeks, and it's not cheap. Private investigators typically charge about $650 a day. On this stakeout, Salazar was looking for visual proof that a husband was cheating on his wife. We waited and waited.
You have to be really patient. You can't be driving around a lot. If you do several passes, the neighbors start to get suspicious. We're going to set up right here and just wait for him. We've been doing surveillance on him now for approximately 3 weeks, and the client wants to see how serious he is about this relationship.
Several hours later, we were still waiting. Alex Salazar has been a PI since 1999, and he's seen more than his share of cheating husbands. Salazar's #1 weapon, the video camera.
I've filmed some guys going from woman to woman to woman, and some of them just having sex out in the open blatantly. We caught one guy who was literally having 4 different relationships that the wife didn't know anything about.
When you actually show this video to a client for the first time, what is their reaction usually?
I've actually had one go into a panic attack. She saw her husband getting oral sex.
Salazar got the goods on this guy, yet no matter how much evidence there is, many wives find it hard to leave.
I'm working on it. I just have to be careful because he has threatened me that he's going to burn the house. He's going to hurt my parents.
I obviously don't want to be privy to anyone getting beaten up, much less killed, which does happen.
Clara Harris knew about her husband's ongoing affair, yet she desperately wanted him back. And desperation led to a deadly confrontation that put Harris behind bars for 20 years. She's locked up at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas.
She has filed an appeal with the First Court of Appeals in Texas. They denied her request to grant a new trial, and it has now moved up the ladder to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Her, of course, desire would be that her conviction is overturned so that she can have another trial.
Harris contends that her attorney was ill during the trial and failed to provide adequate representation. Parham denied the allegations. The appeal also takes issue with the judge, who refused to admit a reenactment video into the proceedings. That video showed Clara's crime in a very different light. The judge stood by her decision not to admit the video into evidence.
To this day, Clara regrets it with every fiber of her body, and she just wants people to know that that was not intentional. She loved David. Her every intention was to take David home with her that night and leave Gail stranded in the parking lot with a broken down car.
Clara Harris was in a dissociative state, in a rage. I don't believe that she would ever do that again unless some horrible life circumstances recurred. These things are highly treatable.
From what I'm hearing, she's still blaming others. I'd love to see Clara, realize what she's done and move forward. I think it's the only way she's going to get there.
Clara Harris becomes eligible for parole in 2013. She will be 55 years old. In the meantime, Harris is trying hard to make things right.
Clara is spending her time punching out Braille books for children. She's making the most of her circumstances. She's doing good works in prison. She's a model prisoner. Her children are being brought to see her every couple of weeks, adjusting as normally as kids can in this situation. It's going to be awfully tough.
More than 1,000 miles away, Margaret Rudin is doing time at the Southern Nevada Women's Correctional Facility for the murder of her husband, Ron. Rudin's life sentence was reduced to 20 years. Margaret's first shot at parole comes in 2009 when she will be 66 years old.
There's no guarantee that she'll receive parole at any given time, much less the first time she comes up. She's going to be in custody for a while.
Rudin also filed an appeal.
I will fight back in every way possible I can to overrule the verdict.
Currently, Margaret Rudin and her attorneys are trying to get a new trial based upon allegations that her attorneys at the first trial were ineffective. The thing that I keep saying is that if we had a new trial on Margaret Rudin, What would be different about it? What additional witnesses would be called that weren't called? What questions would be asked that weren't asked? What would happen that didn't happen in the first one?
Rudin's lawyers say they did the best job they could.
If you believe that Margaret Rudin is guilty, clearly there is somebody out there who helped her, somebody who is also just as guilty as she. Police have never found that person. Margaret Rudin almost got away with this.
As for Rudin's alleged accomplice, Yehuda Sharon, he was never charged in the case and maintains he had nothing to do with the death of Ron Rudin. Sharon tried to put the whole ordeal behind him by writing an inspirational memoir.
The book is called The Lord is My Shepherd. I fear no evil. I don't care to visit Margaret. I don't care to hear from Margaret. I wish Margaret to be far, far, far away from me.
Margaret Rudin and Clara Harris will eventually be set free, but it's likely Kristen Rossum will remain locked away. Rossum is serving life with no possibility of parole at Valley State Prison for Women in Chowchilla, California. Rossum's attorneys filed an appeal shortly after she was convicted of killing her husband in November 2002.
Kristen Rossum was a drug addict. Drug addiction is quite treatable. Whether or not she also has personality issues, those things can be managed in the context of recovery.
But that's not all. The family of the victim, Greg DeVillers, filed a civil suit against San Diego County. The lawsuit charged the medical examiner's office with negligence and claimed Rossum should never have been hired.
The DeVillers families always felt that the County of San Diego shared some blame in the sense that they did essentially hire this person. If they had conducted a good background check, they would have found out that she had a problem with methamphetamine. And then essentially to give her free access to those drugs and to the poison that she ended up using to murder Gregory, I think upsets the family, as it should.
The civil suit named Kristen Rossum and her former lover, Michael Robertson, as co-defendants. Reportedly, Robertson is still living abroad. That case is pending. In June 2005, 4 months before her 29th birthday, Rossum's hopes for a new criminal trial were dashed when a judge denied her appeal.
For Kristen Rossum, Margaret Rudin, and Clara Harris, life goes on behind prison walls. In cases like these, nobody wins, and there are no easy answers. I'm Samantha Harris. Thanks for watching.